Hey guys, and welcome to how I paint my Von Ryan Leapers. To start off with, this is the surface primer that I used. However, this is not necessary just because I did it through an airbrush, but Wraithbone, anything along those lines will also work as well. So first things first, what we're going to be doing is applying some like reddish areas using Carroburg Crimson sprayed through the airbrush. It's not necessary to do it for an airbrush, you can actually do it via brush. I just like the look that you get when you do it with an airbrush. The reason I'm going for Carroburg Crimson is because I'm not very keen on the typical purple look that you tend to get with Tyranids. I sort of like the like the reddy flesh because I want this to be, because this is going to have some like red bits on like the shell armor plating, and so it all sort of matches into that tone. But we're just working his way around the miniature, applying it mainly to like joint areas and areas where like its hooks and like its claws and stuff like that are going to be, but we are going to apply another reddish wash to this a little bit later on. So just working my way around the miniature, but like the tentacle things that are coming out of his mouth, pay special attention to them, and sometimes on the joints I had a little bit of another layer just to darken it up just that little bit more. But any joint areas, any areas that are like towards a claw and the mouth, this is where we're going to be applying that Carroburg Crimson. Next up is the Targor Ragshade. I'm just going to apply this liberally all over the miniature. Don't worry if you do get a little bit on the armor plating. This is because we're going to paint over this layer, so don't worry too much about that. And the beauty of this is it's not going to overpower what we've already done, but literally just go around all the skin areas and all the crevices that you want to put this on and just apply it liberally. So once that's dry, we're going to give the entire miniature a dry brush of bone white Vallejo game colour. It's not necessary to use this if you've got something like Wraithbone from Citadel. It's just a little bit of a brighter colour than what your initial base coat were. And we're just going to use the dry brushing technique and apply this to the entire skin. Now when it comes to dry brushing, you don't want to be, like putting it on your brush and then whacking it on some kitchen roll and then applying it, because that's when you tend to get that like chalky, audible, dusty look. What I'm using here is the Artus Opus way of doing it. If you want to learn how to do this, it's a fantastic way. I think it's a technique that you should all definitely look into. But essentially what we've got is a texture palette, and that little sponge thing at the top is like, it's just got a tiny little bit of water in it which dampens your dry brush slightly. The beauty of these texture palettes is, as you can see here as I'm brushing away, you can test it out before you actually do it, so you can get and rub as much into your brush as you want, and because it's got a little bit of damp, you're not going to get that chalky effect. So we're just going to lightly work his way around the entire miniature. Again, don't worry if it goes onto those bone, armor, carapace areas, because we're going to paint over them in just a second. But just work your way around the flesh and apply an entire dry brush to the flesh slash skin areas. After that, go round all the armor areas and paint them black. There's no specific black that you should use for this. It can be absolutely any black you want. If you use contrast paints and do that, and you'll get your natural highlights, but I just tend to use AK's black, and it's got great coverage, and just go around all the areas. And then we're going to move on to my favourite product, which is AK Streak and Grime. This is in enamel. If you've never used these before, I highly recommend going out and getting some. All you need is some mineral spirits. Just be careful with these because they can be quite toxic if you're inhaling them, so I recommend wearing a mask and make sure you're in a well-ventilated area for the YouTube police. The Streak and Grime I've got here is the Winter Streak and Grime. There's not much difference to the original. If you've got the original, use that, or if you've got this, you can use that. It doesn't really make a massive difference. This one's just slightly a little bit a little bit greener. And all I'm going to do is work my way around the miniature. I've got a little pot, little tin of mineral spirits, and I'm just dipping my brush in there because I've got used to how I can thin it on the brush, and I just work my way around the entire miniature. This includes the black armor, and just put like a light wash of the Winter Streak and Grime all over your miniature. Now once you've applied that, you don't necessarily have to wait for it to dry. I tend to give it about 5-10 minutes before I start dipping a cotton bud or your brush and just start to wick away and very gently roll some mineral spirits, dip it in your mineral spirits and start to remove that excess streak and grime. And what it'll do, because it acts a little bit like a wash, it's going to stay in those crevices, but the beauty of enamels, you get this like chalky, grimdarky finish to it once everything's up, done and dried. It just gives the insecty bug Von Reaper a little bit of a grimy look, as though it's, you know, insects are always in mud and these are jumping out of places, and it overall just gives it that more icky, dirty, grungy look to the skin and the bones. Whilst waiting for that to dry, I'm now going to apply the AK Dark Earth to the base, because while it's drying we can apply this to it. Now the reason, like I said in my old video, I used to apply my base in either before and then paint it right at the end, but I always used to paint my sand and like the mud and stuff this sort of brown. So what I've started to do now, is because this is the sort of base colour that I want to when it's dry, I've just started applying this like halfway through or towards the end once I've done all my spraying and primed it and everything like that. But just go around, and again this comes down to what sort of base you want, but for me this is the one that I'm applying. Once that's dry, we're going to use a contrast paint, Sigval Burgundy, and what we're going to do is apply this to like the pincers and tentacles that are coming out of his mouth. Now this is a very, very, very strong contrast paint, so I've heavily thinned it with water, maybe 2 or 3 drops of water to every drop of contrast paint, and I'm just going around all these areas towards like the tips of them, and just to darken them up a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, because we are a little bit later on going to be adding some blood effects, but work your way around there. And also it's got like these little crack parts in its arms and its legs. It's like the skin split open, you can see underneath it, and I'm just going to apply like a small wash of the same colour to those little flesh areas as well. Next up, we're just going to paint all your details. We're going to start with some white. Again, this can be any white, there's no specific white. If you've got a white, use the white. We're going to do the eyes and teeth and just paint all those little bits of details in. And then we're going to get the contrast paint, which is a yellow paint, which is Iron Jaws Yellow, and we're just going to apply that to the eyes. It's more like, it's not as strong as your Imperial Fish Yellow, it's more like a grungy yellow, and we're just going to pop that, once your white's dried, onto the eyes. Now for the black carapace armor, this is where we're going to start to highlight that. I'm using Ash Grey first by AK Interactive, and again we're going back to the dry brush technique and just giving all the black areas a slight dry brush. Now I am going to teach another technique when I do my next Tyranid video, where you can go in and paint, you know, like your individual little strands and stuff on, but for this one I'll just show you a quick way of being able to do it and get quite a good maximum effect from it. But you're just going to work around all your black areas and just give them a full dry brush, just working your way around the entire miniature. Once you've completed that, we're going to use burnt red. Now the Von Reapers, I quite like how the black armor, or in the GW art, it's got like these little bits of red on it. Now I'm only going to be dry brushing this onto the very tips of his claws, and then like on the top of his armor, like going as though it's got like a line, like a stripe going down the middle of its back and down the middle of each one. We're going to start to dry brush on there as well. It don't have to be like a perfect line, just as long as you're catching those top raised edges, as you can see here, because I've got a flat dry brush. I'm just using it on its angle and just highlighting the top of those areas, just to start to build up a little bit of red. And to me, I do really like this. If you look at something like a hornet bee or something like that, where they've got like these little yellowy bits and stuff, but with this we're just going to use the red instead, as though it's got like some beastly and sexy stuff going onto it, and just adding that little bit of different colour. You could do this in purple if you wanted, you know, mix it up depending on what sort of colour you want your army. But again, for the claws and stuff, we're just applying it to the very tips, and then we're going to highlight this red in the next phase. but this could be any red, like your Mephiston red. I'm using dirty red, and all the colours that you see me use in this video, all the tools and stuff like that, you can find them on my affiliate links below in the description from Element Games. But once you've done that darker red, or your darker purple, whatever colour you want to go for, even a blue would look cool, you're just going to get a brighter version of that colour and just make it a little bit tighter with your highlights and your dry brushing, and just go back over some of those areas again, paying special attention to those edges. I will be in future doing videos on basing myself, because I know we all like to have different terrains and bases, but if you want to know my recipe for this, because I wanted it to be quick, obviously we've used the dark earth, and I'm just giving it a small dry brush of I can never get my words out with these names. I'm going to know how to say it. Zamzri dust. Oh my, I'm not even going to attempt to say it. But anyway, yeah, that colour. You just work your way around your base, just giving it a small dry brush, and then if you want to add some grass textures, whatever you want to add to it, just do that. I just had a little bit of flock to mine and some like little grainy wooded leaf sort of things. But again, the basing does come down entirely to you. Now, as one last little feature we're going to add to our miniature is blood. Now, this is the Vallejo special effects paint, which is blood, just called thick blood. Any sort of blood will work for this. I do recommend mixing a little bit of, maybe brown in there with it, but we're just going to get like a stippling action. You can see I've got one of these brushes what I use for when I'm using chipping fluid, and it's just a standard brush that's been snipped towards bottom. And these make great stippling brushes, or brushes where if you want to, like flick some blood onto it. But we're just going to apply a little bit around its mouth. Now, in this picture, you can see that I did another one of these miniatures, and I used the Uhu glue method and mixed a bit of blood texture in that to make it even more gory, but that's entirely up to how extreme you want to go with it. And then that's it. That's pretty much your miniature finished. So if you've got any questions or you want to know anything else, please let me know in the comment section below. Again, I would like to thank you for watching this video, and if you could, it would really help me out if you could hit that like button, and if you're not already, please remember to subscribe. And remember, I've got a competition coming up where you can win a fully painted Leviathan box set, so if you want to be in a chance to win that, make sure you stay tuned. And until next time guys, I'll catch you in my next video.